Right, good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Today we are learning Daf Lamed Dalet in Maseches Rosh Hashana. For those of you who have been keeping track, I have. Today is 25% of all of Shas. Daf Lamed Dalet, 25.00 something percent of all of the Daf. I don't have that. We could figure it out. That I don't know. But Baruch Hashem, we've made it a quarter of the way through Shas. The videos that I started with had a lot less gray hair. And I will, I'll blame that on the room instead of on my age, but let's get started. We're on Lamed Dalet. What we're going to do tonight is learn until, I have hair, that's true. I'm going to learn until the last 10 lines or so on Lamed Hey. We'll save that for Shabbos. And again, we'll have a siyum, a deluxe kiddush on Shabbos with rolls to be Yotzei Suda together. We'll bench together. We'll probably sing a little bit. I'm just guessing. But I saw the food that's being ordered and it's ridiculous. So please feel free to join. Yeah, it's going to be great. 1/3 of the way down. Siyum's going to be right after davening. Inshal, like from the pulpit, right? Inshal. So we'll finish right there. We'll finish it, and then we'll go to Kiddush. So yesterday we were discussing how we know that we do Tkiya followed by whatever the requirement is. Let's say a Trua followed by a Tkiya. How do we know that that's the case? Those are not required. We say that they're all required midoraisa. How do we know that that's the case? So we learned yesterday either a hekesh or a gzeira shava about shvi'i. And today we're going to learn another shita on this topic. Says the Gemara, B'hai Tana, we're 15 lines down or so, 15 lines down, Lamed Dalet Amud Aleph, middle of the line. B'hai Tana ma'isila b'gzeira shava mi midbar. There's another Tana that learns out this halacha of when the pshuta, the tkiya, that those tkiyas that are bookending a trua, we learned that from somewhere else. The beginning of the Brisa doesn't talk about it, but at the end of the Brisa, we'll talk about it. The Tanya, the Brisa writes, quoting the pasuk, "Uskatem tirua tkiya bifnei atzma, tru bifnei atzma." Those are different types of tkiyas. So the Brisa says, maybe not. Ata omer tkiya bifnei atzma, tru bifnei atzma. You think that these tkiyas are different? Oh, eno ela tkiya v'tru achasi. Maybe the pasuk is just saying the same thing, but in two different words. So it says the Gemara, "Kshu omer v'hakilas hakahal tiskau v'lo tariu." The pasuk says explicitly that you're being tokeya and you're not being tariya. So therefore, we see the pasuk clearly indicates have omer tkiya bifnei atzma, tru bifnei atzma. And then the Brisa continues with the part that we actually need for our purpose, which is how do you know that there's a tkiya before and after? How do we know that we have a regular tkiya before the trua? Says the Gemara, Talmud Lomar skatem trua. And how do we know that we have it afterwards? Talmud Lomar tarua. Trua yisko. So we see that we have both before and after. But Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher of Yochanan ben Baruch Omer Eino Tzarech. He says we don't need that at all. Why not? Because the words are repeated in the Torah. The words, as we will see in a moment, uskatim trua, are in multiple psukim. Harehu Omer uskatim trua shenis. It says it a second time, and therefore, because it says it a second time, shein Talmud Lomar shenis. We don't need it to have two times. So therefore, ma Talmud Lomar shenis. Why did we have it again? Because says the Gemara, Zebona ab shekol makom shenemar trua tehet tkiya shniela. That every time that there's going to be a trua, there's going to be a tkiya that is going to be matched with it, and therefore, ein li'ela b'midbar. Those psukim, they're only speaking about the midbar. So how do we know that we're talking about Rosh Hashana b'chlal? The Rosh Hashana minayin Talmud Lomar trua l'gzeira shava, and that's how he answers his question. That was what we started with. We said, how do we know about the pshutim? We don't need to learn it from the psukim, it therefore must be from the gzeira shava of trua. And now let's get into some more of the halachos. Although I will add that we're going to be doing drashos until approximately, I don't know, another 8 lines or so, 10 lines or so, something like that, maybe more. And then we'll get into some very practical halachic pieces. But this is like really the engine that makes halacha tick, which is understanding these drashos. So let's push here. We're a little bit more than halfway down. Lamed Dalet Amud Aleph. V'shalosh truos nemar b'Rosh Hashana. There are 3 truos that we say on Rosh Hashana. So that's what we do. Tkiya, trua, tkiya, tkiya, trua, tkiya, tkiya, trua, tkiya. There's 3 tkiyas and 3 truas in a row that are bookended, each of them by tkiyas. So says the Gemara, what are the psukim that support this? Shalosh truos nemar b'Rosh Hashana. Number 1, pasuk number 1, Shabbason zichron trua. Number 2, Yom trua, Yom trua. And number 3, v'havarta shofar trua. These are the 3 psukim that indicate we're obligated to have the trua, that sound. And says the Gemara, ushtei tkiyos l'chol achas ve'achas, and each of the truas are bookended. So that's a total of 9. Matzinu l'meidim shalosh truos v'sheish tkiyos nemar b'Rosh Hashana. You have 3 tkiyos. Each of them are bookended by 3 truos. Each of them are bookended by tkiyas. That leads to a total of 9. And then says the Gemara, how many of these truos are d'oraisa and how many of the truos are d'Rabbanan? So says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down, 4 lines before the wide lines on Lamed Dalet Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, Shtayim midivrei Torah. 2 of the 3 are explicit in the Torah. The achas midivrei sofrim, and one of them is a din d'Rabbanan. What is this rooted in? Well, we said there were 3 psukim, but not all 3 psukim are necessarily available to teach us that each of the truos are going to be deoraisa. So that's what the Gemara says, 4 lines before the wide lines. 2 of the psukim are still viable, are still available, I should say, which teach us that there are going to be 2 of the truos are deoraisa. So according to this opinion, how do we break up the psukim? Shabbason zichron trua v'ha'avarta shofar trua midivrei Torah. These 2 psukim mean that we're going to have 2 truas that are deoraisa. But the last pasuk of Yom Tru Yelachem letalmudo huba, that pasuk is left for a drasha. What is the drasha that it is left for? So this is indicated in Rashi. Rashi says halfway down on the page, la Talmud Ahuba, on the Tosfos side, on the outer margin. There's no Tosfos in here, just a tiny one at the bottom. But where Tosfos normally is, halfway down on that section on the left side of the page, on Lamed Zalim and Aleph, Rashi says la Talmud Ahuba. What does it mean? Mufne l'gzera shava shadar shtrua shtrua. We needed this pasuk to be available for the gzera shava that we had, so therefore it can't be available to tell us that there's a third trua, which means that only 2 of the truas are doraisa and one of them is derabbanan, because that pasuk is needed for other things. However, that's only one shita, which says that 2 of the truas are doraisa and one's derabbanan. And here's another shita. First of the long lines, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmeni Amar Rabbi Yonasan. What does he say? Achas midivrei Torah. Only one of the 3 truas are doraisa. V'shtayim midivrei sofrim. How so? How did the psukim break up? So the pasuk says, "V'varta shofar trua midivrei Torah." That pasuk is teaching us that one of the truas is a din doraisa, but the other 2 psukim are needed. One pasuk says Shabbason zichron trua, and the other pasuk says V'yom trua yiyalachem letalmud huba. That also is going to teach us something new. Well, we know what one of the psukim teach us, which is that it leaves the word trua available for the gzera shava, which taught us that there's a tkiya before and after each trua. But letalmud huba says the Gemara, second of the wide lines, 2/3 of the way down. Lamed says the Gemara, letalmud huba. What is it? What extra is this pasuk being available for, so that it therefore isn't available to teach us that a trua is doraisa? Says the Gemara, to teach us that this is a mitzvah asasei grama, that the mitzvah of shofar can only be done during the day. The idach, the other Tana, who doesn't learn the psukim this way, where does he learn that from? How does he know that? So we understand from the shita of Rav Shmuel bar Nachmeni how he understands day and not night, because he has an explicit pasuk that talks about it. But the first shita doesn't say like that. This was the Gemara doesn't say the name of the person who it was, but the first shita, which says that there's only one pasuk that's mufna for the gzera shava. How does he learn the day and night is aser? So the Gemara says nafkale. He learns it at me by Yom Kippurim. Oh, you learn it from Yom Kippur? If you're going to be learning stuff from Yom Kippur already, says the Gemara, that's what, if you're going to do that, make everybody's life easier. If you can learn that shofar can only be blown during the day and Rosh Hashana from Yom Kippur, then nigmor nami mina l'pshuta l'fanei pshuta l'achareh. Then the whole last blot that we've been discussing is, how do we know that there's a tekiah before a trua and a tekiah after a trua? So, the gzera shava shvi shvi. The other Tana says, no, it's not that one. It's a different gzera shava trua. Says the Gemara, if you're learning from Yom Kippur, we already know those halachos. So why are you using up extra psukim over here? Says the Gemara, because this Tana was of the opinion v'havarta ta'aviru lo mashma, that the words of v'havarta and ta'aviru, which was one of the ways to learn out that there was a tekiah before and after a trua, lo mashma, he says that the psukim are not mashma that way. Oh, well, that means that the words v'ha'avarta and ta'aviru, that those 2 psukim are now available for other drushes. Says the Gemara, 4 lines into the wide lines, says the Gemara, elamai dar shibuhu. So what are the drushes that they do with v'ha'avarta and ta'aviru? Says the Gemara, v'ha'avarta, what do we do with the word v'ha'avarta? Kid Rav Masna. What did Rav Masna teach us? Tamar Rav Masna, v'ha'avarta derech ha'avarasa. Remember we said that there was a possible case scenario with, in very hot water, you could reshape a shofar and then blow shofar from the other end, from the end that is not the natural end, but you can reshape it. That the Gemara said that was just the name of Rav Masa, and that's where we learned from this pasuk of v'ha'avarta. Okay, what does this Tana do with the word ta'aviru? Says the Gemara, ta'aviru, says the Gemara, that word is ta'aviru shofar b'chol artzechem. That's the pasuk that's talking about in the times of Yova, letting everybody know what's going on, to tell the whole world. You should walk around with a shofar literally in your hand. That's what pshat in the pasuk is. The idach, what does the other shita say? Where do they learn out these halachas? Well, they don't need to worry about Rav Masna. They don't need a pasuk for Rav Masna. The Rav Masna midashani b'dibure. The fact that the Torah uses the word ha'avara instead of tekiah, we already know the din of Rav Masna that it has to be blown shofar like it grew. Derech ha'avarasa. That makes sense. And ta'aviru, he doesn't agree with that Tana. Biyad lo matzis amris. You can't say that the halacha was to walk around carrying a shofar. Why not? Because the Gamar avra Moshe, because we have a separate gzera shava that teaches us that they were not walking around with a shofar in their hand. Ksiv hacha v'avarta shofar trua, u'ksiv hasam v'yitzav Moshe v'yaviru kol ha'machane, ma'alahola Bekol. The way that it was communicated was by voice. And here too, by the shofar, it was communicated by voice. It wasn't ha'aviru, to carry it in your hand. That's not what was happening. They were talking with their own voice. Fine. And then the Gemara concludes this section, and then we'll get into some the actual how we actually blow shofar now. The way that it's set up is that we do tashrat, and then we do tashat and tarat. So all that's going to be explained in the last 10 lines of this page. But before we do that, just one more part of the drasha. Says the Gemara, 12 lines from the bottom. Today's Tana that we started with, 1/3 of the way down, who says that we learned the pshutos, that the tkiya before and after the trua, that it's learned out from the midbar. But in the midbar, they were using trumpets, they were using horns, they weren't using a shofar. Afkan chatzotros. Maybe we should say by Rosh Hashana that we should use horns and not a regular shofar. Says Gemara, we can't say that. Talmud Omar, the pasuk says, and we've seen this pasuk a few times. You should blow shofar when there is covering on the holiday of our holiday. In what month is the moon covered? Omer is the Rosh Hashana. It's really technically not true. That's not actually covered. It's just that the sun is behind. It's just set up in a way where you can barely see the moon. So therefore, that's what we consider Rosh Hashana, the Kama Rachmana shofar, and that's what the Torah says. Tiku b'chodesh shofar, and therefore, according to all days, we use a shofar. Says the Gemara, how do we decide what to actually do lemaisa for shofar blowing? This is the actual halachic sugya, the next 10, 15 lines that teaches us how to blow shofar. So Iskin Rabbi Abo Bekesari Tikiya Shlosha Shvarim Trua Tikiya Tashrat. That's what we do. So we do a regular tkiya, we do 3 shvarim, we do trua, which is all the small, tiny blasts, and then another tkiya. This is mamish what we do. Says the Gemara, wait a second. That makes no sense. Manavshach. Either way you look at it, a trua needs to be defined. Yalule, yalil, if they're very short blasts, like we learned yesterday, le'avid tkiya, trua, utkiya, then we don't need the shvarim. And v'i genuche ganach, if what we say that a yavava actually means is a little bit of a longer sound, then le'abit tkiya shlosha shvarim utkiya, and don't do the trua. All you're saying is that you don't understand pshat and what a trua is, but you can't do both. Says the Gemara, that's exactly what he's saying. Misaf galei, 6 lines from the bottom. Misaf galei, ginuche ganache lulei. He wasn't sure, so he said, let's do both. Says the Gemara, that doesn't work. Maskifla Rabbi Dilma yilulei hava. Maybe really it should just be the trua, the very short blasts. The kamafsik shlosha shvarim ben trua letkiya. And now you have a hefsek in your tkiyas. You're doing the wrong things. It really should just be tarat. It should really just be shkia. It should really just be tkiya, trua tkiya. And you inserted the shvarim, which you should not have done. It should be a hefsek. Says the Gemara, no, don't worry about it. Dahadar avid tkiya, trua tkiya. You're right. I understand your concern, and therefore we're going to do what you want, which is tarat. After we do tashrat, we're also going to do tarat, just the tkiya, trua tkiya. Maskiflo ravina v'dilma genuche hava. Maybe you're wrong, and maybe it's not the short blast. Maybe really yavava is the longer blast. The kamafsika trua bein shvarim l'tkiya, and there's no point at all in doing what you want to do tashrat, because then you have the hefsek of trua between the shvarim and the tkiya. That's also a waste of time. Don't do that. Says the Gemara, you're right. Because we're going to do, don't worry, we're going to do tashrat, and then we'll do tashrat, and then we'll do tashat. So all the different iterations of tkiya will be taken care of. And Lamai said, this is what we do. Says the Gemara, what problem did he fix? Then what was the whole point of this anyways? Why are you doing the tashrat? Says the Gemara, maybe it's because he held that there was another version, another idea that we haven't seen at all. That maybe a trua is really both. It's really short sounds and long sounds. And therefore, he needs to fulfill that obligation by doing tashrat, followed by tashat in case there's a hefsek, and in case it's genuche ganach, followed by tarat, and in case it was yilula yalil, and it really was the shorter blast, and that covers all of our bases. So that's how we have developed our halacha. Tashrat, in case it was a double sound of the shorter and longer blasts, tashat in case it was just a shvarim sound, and tarat just in case it was the shortest sounds. Yihachi says the Gemara, maybe we shouldn't just do tashrat, we should do tarshas. Maybe we should do, what do? We do tkiya, shvarim, shur tkiya. But maybe if you think it's both, maybe the order should be reversed. Maybe it should be tkiya, then trua, then shvarim, and then tkiya. Says the Gemara, no, that's not possible. Although that is a suggestion. Maybe we should say ibcha tkiya, trua, shlosha shvarim tkiya, dilma yolil v'ganach. Maybe the short sounds come before the long sounds, and therefore the trua should be before the shvarim. Says the Gemara, no. Stama de milsa ki misra be'inish milsa, when something bad happens to a person, bereisha ganach v'hadar yolo. When a person is crying, first it's the longer moaning sounds, followed by the briefer crying sounds, and those types of tears, that type of crying. And therefore, we don't ever have a havamina that it should be tkiya followed by a trua, followed by a shvara, followed by a tkiya. So that's the way that we navigate it best. That's the way that we navigate it, which is to say, all of the iterations are understood and met, and that is why we do what we do, halacha l'maisa, period. The Gemara stops right here. This is what we do. This is how we blow shofar. This is what we do. Okay, we do a lot more of them, but this is the baseline of what we do in order to be yotze all of the shitas. So in other words, really midoraisa, it should only be 9. But we're confused, where we don't know. There's 4 possible iterations. So 3, what is it? It's 1, 2. It's 3 possible sets of iterations. So we're doing 27 kolos. Okay, that's good. And you're done with Shas. I understand. Got it. Says the Gemara in the bottom line of Lamed Daled and Aleph. Let's continue. The Gemara says, "Taka b'rishona mashach b'shniya kishtayim." That if a person were to put enough wind into the shofar to do 2 tkiyas at one time, we said it only counts as 1. Amar Rav Yochanan. Turning to the top of Lamed Daled Amud Beis, final turn of the page. Shama teisha tkiyos b'teisha shaos b'yom. You heard your minimum 9 tkiyos over the course of a whole day. Yatsa. Wow. Okay. One tkiya per hour, and you're done. So it says the Gemara Tanya Namihachi. The Brisa supports this very idea, because what does the Brisa say? 2 lines down. Shama teisha tkiyos b'teisha shaos b'yom yatsa. However, the Brisa adds what the Gemara did not. Mites b'nei adam ke'echad lo yatsa. If 9 people blow shofar at the same moment, that's not possible. This goes back to a previous idea that we're not able to process multiple sounds at one time. Tkiya mizeh u'trua mizeh yatsa. If you have 2 people, that's a great way to save breath. You have one person do a tkiya, the next person does the trua, and the next person does the tkiya. Everybody's using half the energy. Again, even if they alternate turns, all is well. Even coupled with the fact that it's spread out over the day, doesn't matter. You're yotze. Says the Gemara. Does Rav Yochanan really say this idea that the teisha tkiyos can be spread out all day? After all, that when it comes to saying halalu v'megillah, that if you have a hefsek that's long enough to have processed the whole halal or megillah, your hefsek's too long. You lost what you gained, and you have to start over from scratch. So how can you tell me, Rabbi Yochanan, at the very top of the page, that if you hear 9 kolos over 9 hours, you're yotze? You hold it by halal and megillah that if there's a hefsek long enough to accomplish whatever you're doing, the halal or the megillah, you have to start over. So it says the Gemara, lo kasha hadidei hadarabe. One is his shita, and one is the shita of his Rebbe. Udidei lo, would his shita really be what it is? Rabbi Abo have a shakil ba'azil basred Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Abo was following with Rav Yochanan. They were talking and learning and walking. And he was he was reading. He was saying Kriya Shema, whatever it was. That's man Kriya Shema. He didn't want to lose his opportunity. So Rabbi Abba was saying Kriya Shema. Kimat lemavuos metunafos. When they got to alleyways that were very dirty, ishtik. Rabbi Abba stopped saying Kriya Shema because he felt that the din was that you couldn't continue saying Kriya Shema here. Basar de Chalif. Basar de Chalif. After they passed over the alleyways, Amar le Ma'u Ligmor. He looks up at his Rebbe. He looks up to Rabbi Yochanan and says, "What should I do? Can I finish saying Shema?" He says, "Amar le im shahis kedei ligmor skula chozer l'rosh." Oh, so we see Rabbi Yochanan Taka does hold of this halacha that if you have an interruption that's long enough, then you're chozer l'rosh. But we just said v'didei that according to him, he held that didn't apply to him. That was his Rebbe's shita. So now we see a kasha from Rabbi Yochanan to Rabbi Yochanan. So says the Gemara, hachi ka'amar le. He's saying to Rabbi Abba something different. L'didi lo svirli. I don't agree with you. In regards to what? I don't agree with you that you needed to stop saying Shema when you got to the alleyways. You could have just kept on going. But l'didach desviralach. But according to you, who holds that you have to stop saying Kriya Shema when you get to the mavuos metunafos, that when you get to these alleyways that are filled with the garbage cans, that you should stop. Then according to you, im shayis kedei ligmor skula chozer l'rosh. I agree with that, but I don't hold like you. Okay. Then the Gemara says, let's get into a connected sugya, a couple more quick sugyas, and then we'll stop for the night. Says the Gemara, 1/3 of the way down, on Lamed Daled Amud Beis Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis have taught us tekiyas ein ma'akvos zoes zo. The different types of tekiyas are not ma'akiv one another. Brachos ein ma'akvos zoes zo. The different blessings of Shemona Esrei are not ma'akiv one another. Tekiyos u brachos shel Rosh Hashana v'Yom HaKippur v'shel Yom HaKippur ma'akvos. So that's glad we clarified this. The beginning of the Brisa is talking about non-Rosh Hashanah days. It's talking about a tainus. There, okay, you don't blow shofar properly, it's not the end of the world. Throughout Elul, not the end of the world. On Rosh Hashanah, we have to be more makbid. But the tkiyos ubrachos shel Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippurim, those are ma'akiv. My time. What is the reason why we're more careful, more conscientious about Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur. Says the Gemara, my time, Amar Rabba, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you should say in front of me on Rosh Hashanah, you should say Malchios and Zichronos, and you should blow shofar. Malchios, famous Gemara. What is the whole goal of Malchios? That you should know, you should make me your king. What is Zichronos? That the good memories, the positive deeds that you've done should be brought in front of me. And listen to this language. Ubameh. How do you do this? How do you accomplish this? B'shofar. Unbelievable idea. We often look at them, Malchios, Zichronos, Shofars. They are not the same thing. Malchios and Zichronos are content driven. Shofar is the method to bring that up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So sometimes we're like, what kavanah should we have? So the Gemara is telling us that the way that we communicate our Malchios and Zichronos is by blowing shofar. A beautiful idea that brings us to the two dots halfway down. And we had said earlier in the Brayso, that if a person said shebirech in this case means that they had the daven musaf, so they daven musaf, they didn't have a shofar. Let's say there's only one in town. Fine. So they say Shmona Esrei. They still have to say Shmona Esrei. So he's birech. And then ve'achar kach nitzman lo shofar. Then he gets a shofar. The Mishnah had said, it's okay, it's okay, he should blow shofar. Taima. The reason why we said that was because the lo havale shofar meikar, because he didn't have a shofar to start with. Ha havale shofar meikar. But if in fact he did have one, then kishama lahu. If he had a shofar, then when he hears shofar, it should be aseder brachos shama lahu. He should say them within his Shmona Esrei, as is the minhag in certain shuls, not our shul, but in certain shuls. Rav Papa, who was davening by himself, Rav Papa Bar Shmuel, he felt a little differently. Kam litzluya. He got up to daven b'yechidus on Rosh Hashana, and Amar le l'shamei, and he said to his servant, Kina hirna, when I motion to you, Kina hirna lach, when I indicate to you, Tokali, I'll be in my private Shmona Esrei. I'm going to make a little knock on the beam, and when I do, be tokeya, tashrat, whatever the tkiyas are, go do your thing. So Amar le Rava. Rava says back to him, absolutely not. We don't paskin that way. Lo amru ela b'chever ha'ir. B'chever ir. The only time we say that you have to blow shofar during Shmona Esrei, that's only going to be b'chever ir, which means when there is a tzibur, but not b'yechidus. And Tanya Namihachi, the Brayso supports the sheet of Rabba and argues against Rav Papa. Kshu shoman, I'll say there brachos. When you hear shofar, it should be in order, and it should be on the Seder Brachos. When is this true? Last of the short lines, Lamed Dalet, Amud Beis, Bechever Ha'ir. Aval Shelo Bechever Ha'ir. When you're not in a tzibur, when you're davening Shmona Esrei by yourself, even if it's otherwise the minhag of your shul to blow shofar during the Shmona Esrei, Shoman al Seder B'Shelo al Seder Brachos. It should be in order, but it should not be in the Seder HaBrachos. It should not be done during Shmona Esrei. Says the Gemara, v'yachid shelo taka chavera tokeelo, that if a person, one individual did not yet blow shofar and was not yet yotze, so then the Gemara says chavera tokeelo, your friend can be motzi you. However, v'yachid shelo birech, if you have a friend who didn't say a bracha, in other words, Shmona Esrei in this case, ein chavero mevarech alav. Nope, you got to do it yourself. Umitzvah betoken yoser min hamevorchen. The mitzvah, it's a strange comparison, but the Gemara says that the mitzvah tkiyah shofar is greater than that of the Shmona Esrei. What does that mean? So it says the Gemara, Ketzad, what's the case? Shtei ayaros. You've got two cities. This is a theoretical construct. You have two cities. Be'achas token u'achas mevorchen. In one city, they plan to blow shofar and not say Shmona Esrei. In the other city, they plan to say Shmona Esrei but not blow shofar. So what's the halacha? The Brayso says, Holchem lemakom shetoken, ve'en holchem lemakom shemevorchen. You should go to the place where they're being tokeh b'shofar, and you should not go to the place where they're only saying Shmona Esrei without shofar. Says the Gemara, thank you very much. That's ridiculous. Obviously, that's what you should do. Pshita, ha deoraisa, and ha derabanan. Shofar is a din deoraisa. Davening, maybe the structure has elements that are deoraisa, but the lemaisa, it's a din derabanan to daven. So therefore, of course, you should go to a place where you're hearing the tkiyah shofar, but you're not going to be saying Shmona Esrei. Says the Gemara, lo sricha, what's the case? This is very interesting. All right, you have a case like this. City A has a shofar, but it's a suffix if you're gonna hear it. City B has a minyan for Shmona Esrei, and they didn't have machzor, so you're either with the tzibur or you're not. So City A has the shofar, no musaf, but it's a suffix if you'll be yotzei. And City B has sidurim, and you can daven like a mensch. Which one do you do? It's a suffix and a vadai. So suffix doraisa l'chumra against a vadai derabbanan. So then the Gemara is paskening that for you. Suffix doraisa is stronger. In a vacuum, we would always say that a suffix doraisa is strong. Obviously, I'm not sure if I bench suffix doraisa, you have to bench again. This just happened to me. I got interrupted in the middle of benching by something, and I literally just did not know where I was in benching. So I don't know. Did I say the first bracha? I don't even know where I was. It was a bizayon doraisa. That was terrible. But then what do I do? Okay, so if it's a suffix doraisa, you bench again. But here I have a suffix deraisa that I know is important, but it's held up against a chiyuv derabanan, a mitzvah derabanan that's a vadai. It's a great shiloh. And that the Gemara says that we go with the suffix deraisa, even against the opportunity of losing a positive mitzvah derabanan. 2 dots, 3/4 of the way down. Kishem sheshliach tzibor chayev. Kach kol yachid v'yachid. That's what our Mishnah had said, and Rabban Gamliel had said at the end of our Mishnah. Let's look back and see what Rabban Gamliel had said. Rabban Gamliel had said, "Oh, that's not the right Mishnah." He had said that the shliach tzibor can be motzi someone. I don't know. Oh, here it is. That was what the Mishnah said on Lamed Gimel, that everyone's obligated, and then Rabban Gamliel said, "Don't worry, the shliach tzibor can be motzi everyone." So now we're going to analyze this sugya until. This is going to be the last sugya we learn tonight, and then we'll stop about 10 lines from the bottom of the page on Lamed Hey. Let's finish up this last sugya here. So Tanya, Amr lo Rabban Gamliel lidvarecha lama tzibur mispalelin. You, Rabban Gamliel, who say that a shliach tzibur can be motzi everyone. Why is it then that the tzibur is also davening? Let them stand there and say amen, and that's it. Oh, so it says Rabban Gamliel back to them, Amar lahem kedei lahazdir shliach tzibur tfilaso, so that the shliach tzibur can have one more opportunity while everyone's saying Shmona Esrei to organize his Shmona Esrei. They didn't have a machzor laid out like we did. They had to memorize things. They had pieces of paper, whatever they had. It wasn't masudar like we have it. So technically, according to this argument, let the shliach tzibur get up there with his machzor. Everyone's yotzei. That's great, but that's not what we do. We always have the blend. But that was Rabban Gamliel's point. Is just to let him have time to prepare. Amar lahem Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel says to them, according to you, that everyone has to say Shmona Esrei on their own. Why bother having a chazan at all? Why do you need a chazan? Forget that. Everyone say your own Shmona Esrei. It'll shorten davening by like literally 4 hours and go home. What's the problem? It says the Gemara, Amr lo kedei lahotzi she'eino baki. No. The reason why we have chazar hashatz, and this is an important idea, is because not everyone is such a baki. Again, today it's a little easier because of the sidurim that we have. They didn't have a printing press until the 1400s, so we're talking in the times of the brises now. Everything was copied over by hand. Fine. So that was what they answered. Amar lahem, he says, Kishem shemotzi es she'eino baki. According to your logic, that the reason why we do chazar hashatz is in order to help people who don't know how to daven. But if the mechanics in halacha allow for me to be motzi, the person who's not a baki, then kach motzi es a baki. If it works for one, it works for all. If halachically I can be motzi of one person in my chazar hashatz, then nobody needs to daven. Fine. End of conversation from the Tanaim. Then the Gemara says, maybe the Chachamim backtracked in their shita. Amar Rabba Bar Bachan, Amar Rav Yochanan, Modim Chachamim LeRabban Gamliel. They changed their mind. Really, there's no argument, and everyone agrees that there should be Chazar Hashatz. But the Rav Amar Adayin Hi Machlokes. There's a Machlokes as to whether the Machlokes is still a Machlokes. I said, okay, so do we need a shliach tzibur, yes or no? So then the Gemara's first opinion, Rabbi Bar Chana says, not a machlokes anymore. The Chachamim changed their mind. Rav says, still a machlokes. Says the Gemara, 6 lines from the bottom, Shama, Rabbi Chia, Berei de Rabbi Bar Nachmeni. He heard that there was a retraction from the Chachamim. Ozal Amar L'Shmaisa Kamed de Rav Dimi Bar Chinan. And he went to go tell Rav Dimi, hey, I heard that there isn't a machlokes. Amar Le, Rav Dimi says, Hachi Amar Rav, Adaini machlokes. It's not true. There still is a machlokes. It's not so pasha. We need to pasuk in a shaila. It's not so simple that we pasuk like Rabban Gamliel. Amar Le Rabba Bar Bachana, Hachi Kamar. Amar Le, he said, Rabba Bar Bachana, Hachi Kamar. He also says the same thing. Now, what about Rav Yochanan's shita? Amar Rav Yochanan lahashmaisa. If Ligale, when he said that there's no machlokes, then Reish Lakish argued on him. If Ligale, Reish Lakish, Vamar Adaini machlokes. Rav Yochanan clearly thought there was no machlokes because Reish Lakish argued against him, saying there was. So Rav Yochanan thought that the Chachamim did retract their sheets, and they agreed to Rabban Gamliel that there should be Chazar Hashatz. It says the Gemara, Rav Yochanan Hachi. Rav Yochanan was really of the opinion that there was no machlokes. That's not possible. Amar Rav Chana B'Tzipora, Amar Rav Yochanan Hilchas Rabban Gamliel. He says the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel, but if you say the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel, then what are you implying? Halacha mechlal de pligi. That implies that according to Rabbi Yochanan that there really is a machlokes. Oh, so let's try. We'll still push further to see if we can get more of an understanding. You saw like Rabbi Abba miyame, when Rabbi Abba came off of a boat. Rashi shehifli b'sfina liyom v'chazar. He was out. He had a day trip on a boat. So Pirshi explained modim chachamim l'Rabban Gamliel b'brachos shel Rosh Hashana v'shel Yom Kippurim. He was masking in regards to the Shmona Esrei of Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur. The halacha and the other shita, which says that it's a halacha, you're right. It's mechlal de pligi bebrachos techol hashana. It seems to be that they hold differently. Aini, is that really true? Nothing, not talking about the whole year, just by that one area. Ella says the Gemara, you're right. Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, man modim, when we say that there is someone who's being modeh in the Mishnah, that we at the Brisa that we learned at the bottom of Lamed Daled and Amud Beis, that wasn't Stam Chachamim, that was Rab Meir. And V'halacha Michlal de Pligi was the Rabbanan. So Rab Meir, they each have their own shitas, and there's just a Brisa that will explain it all, Kaftor V'ferach. And the Gemara says 10 lines down on the very last Amud of Maseches Rosh Hashana, the Tanya, the Brisa writes, Brachos shel Rosh Hashana v'shel Yom Kippurim Sneach Tzibur Motzei Rabim Dechavas and Rab Meir. Rab Meir is of the opinion that when it comes to Shmona Esrei Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur, the Shleach Tzibur can be motzi other people with their chiyuv. The Chachamim Omrim, they say Kishem Shleach Tzibur Chayev Kach Kol Yachid v'Yachid Chayev. Okay, Ma'ishnahani. That why is it that only by Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur that's true? What about the rest of the year? So says the Gemara, if you want to say that the reason why we're more makbid by Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to have a chazan is because there are so many psukim, but really those are not li'ikuva. Because Amar of Hanan el Amar Rab, brilliant idea. Once you say, and it's written in your Torah, you don't even have to say the rest. Shuvei notzarech. So could you imagine a shorter Shmona Esrei? You're taking away dozens of psukim. All you have to say, yeah, Rosh Hashanah is awesome, and you wrote it in your Torah, Baruch Atah Hashem, and move on. So the Dina, that actually counts. So if the reason why you're saying that Rosh Hashanah is different is because of all the psukim, you technically could get away with not saying them, so then you can't make that distinction. Elam, it must be mishum da'av she brachos. It's not just the psukim. The brachos are longer too. There's 9 brachos. It's not 7 like Shabbos, and it's not like the ones in the year that we say every day, 3 times a day. Okay, so that's what the Gemara answers. Gufa, let's analyze the line that we just read. Amar of Hananel, Amar Rab. Since we have this idea that once you say you don't actually have to read the psukim, we might have thought that this is true only with a yachid, but not true by a tzibur. So let's see if this is going to hold up. Itmar Amar Rav Yeshua ben Levi. Echad Yachid, Echad Tzibur, Kevan Shamar V'Sarasal Kasuv Lemor, Shuvei Natzarach. He applies it widely. And that's what he says, that this idea that when we say that all you have to say is that the Torah says psukim about this idea, that is sufficient. Very powerful psak. So let's say, for example, you're in the middle of your Shmona Esrei from Musaf, and you get to the part of any Musaf on Shabbos, and you don't actually read the psukim of Yom HaShabbos, whatever the psukim are by Rosh Hashanah, by Musaf on Shabbos. And all you say is Sarascha Kasuv Lemor, and then you skip it. So the Gemara says you're Yotzei. You skip the psukim, which is Ikra and Shel Dvarim. The whole reason why we bring a korban musaf is because of psukim. So that's why in musaf we always quote psukim, because it's based on a pasuk in Chumash that we're saying that we're bringing a musaf. That's every Shemona Esrei has psukim in it. Every musaf has psukim in it, because the only reason we say musaf is because of that korban. What if you skip them? L'chori should be Yotzei. That's what the Gemara says. We're going to stop right here at Amar Rav Elazar L'Olam Yasir. We'll finish on Shabbos and Mirz Hashem, B'Shah Tova on the Mazel Tov, and Mirz Hashem will see you all on Shabbos. Looking forward to seeing you then. Have a beautiful night.